Hey, it's Danny from ProjectManaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to share exactly what to do first on a new project. So let's jump straight in. So just imagine that you've joined a new company as a new project manager. You don't know anyone, you've got no network, you've got no resources or contacts. You've got no reputation there, you've got no funding, but you've been given a new project to do. So what are the first things you should do before you get started? And I always do these first 5 things regardless of whether it's a new project in an existing department or a new department or area of the business or a brand new organization. I'll follow these first 5 steps to do personally as a project manager before you do anything, just to get that initial understanding of what's going on. So number 1 is understand the scope of the project that you have been given. That's the key priority. What are you actually trying to deliver here? Is it a system upgrade? Is it a database migration? Is it building some kit, some infrastructure? What are you doing? So make sure you understand the scope. If there's any documentation available, familiarize yourself with it, and then make sure you can relay that to other people so you can communicate clearly what you're doing on your project in a sort of 30-second elevator pitch summary. If you can do that, then you should be comfortable that you know what you're doing. So that's step 1, get clear on what you're doing. Step 2 is understand the system landscape. So what do I mean by that? So let's take the example of upgrading a system. So let's say that's your project, that's the key scope of your project. It's very rare that that's all you're doing, or that system sits in isolation. It's going to sit on a landscape or architectural landscape of other systems that your organization has. So there'll be upstream systems, there'll be downstream systems, there'll be infrastructure your system sits on. So you kind of got like the horizontal and the vertical. You want to make sure you understand that the neighboring landscape of all those other systems and how data runs through it. And once you've done that, it helps you to identify stakeholders that are going to have an interest in your project. It helps you to identify impacts your project might have on other areas. So make sure you can scribble that down, and ideally you want to memorize it so you can actually pull out a clean piece of paper and you can actually sketch out the system landscape. If you get in the habit of doing that on every project, you can actually sketch out the system landscape from memory. It's going to make your life so much easier as you go through the project. You'll have conversations that you can actually contribute to, and you won't be going, oh, I don't really know what they're talking about. You'll understand the conversation and the flow of it because you've memorized that system landscape. It's really powerful. It will save you a lot of time in the future if you get that done at the start. Okay, that's rule number 2, or step number 2. Step number 3 is identify all the stakeholders that are going to have an interest in your project. So again, as I say, that system landscape picture will help you with that. So you can look at that picture, then understand, right, who owns that system that I'm upgrading? Who uses that system? Who operates it on a day-to-day basis? Who would support it if it went down and I had to call someone to bring it back up? Is there a vendor involved in that application? Who is the vendor? And then do the same for the immediate downstream and upstream systems. And then you might have some functions around that system, like a risk department or a business department or a change function department. Who are the key stakeholders? So make sure you identify that. You can have a stab by yourself at first, but you're probably going to need to speak to people to understand that, and you'll figure out who those people are as you go along. Speak to one person, you get a few more names. Speak to them, you get a few more names, and eventually build up a picture, put it on a piece of paper again, just sketch it all out. So what you could do is take that system landscape picture and then just like jot down the names on each area, so who they are, so you've got it all in one place. That's a good way of doing it. So that was step number 3, is identify the stakeholders. Step number 4 is identify the governance and the general processes of that organization. How do they deliver change? There's going to be some procedures that you have to follow. There's going to be governance that you have to follow. There might be a project management office that you're going to have to align to log your project. So you're going to have to understand all the steps that you need to do, because your organization will have ways of doing change. You're going to have to follow that. So get up to speed with that as quickly as possible so you can get familiar with the systems and the documentation. You can start planning out what you need to do, especially in the immediate future. Now, step number 5 is to get some kind of plan together. Now, ideally, if you can create a plan on a page by yourself based on your previous experience and by speaking to a few other people, that's ideal. Even if it's just for now the timelines of the mobilization phase, the design phase, the build phase, the test phase, and then the actual go live date. If you can get that on a plan on a page, that's a great start. But also, what's your personal plan for the next couple of weeks to mobilize the project and get it off the ground? Do you have to do a business case? Do you have to get some kind of operating model impact assessment together? Who do you need to speak to? Where do you get funding from? So you have to ask around, get yourself an immediate plan for the next few weeks to get the project off the ground, and also, if you can, get a end-to-end plan on a page for the whole project, but very high level at this stage. You'll go into the detail later on. Okay, so those are the first 5 things I always do as a project manager on a new project. I'll do a quick recap and then we'll call it a day. Step number 1, understand the scope of what you're doing. You've been given a project, so make sure you understand what you're on the hook for delivering, what you're on the hook for not delivering, or what you don't need to do. Make sure that's documented, even if it's just a 1-pager. Start there, and then make sure that you understand it well enough to be able to explain it to someone else in the form of an elevator pitch if you needed to. Step number 2 is understand the system landscape. So sketch out how the data flows through the landscape. Where does your system fit in with that? What are the upstream and downstream systems? And then on top of that, step number 3 is identify all the stakeholders, and you can use that diagram to help you do that. Sketch on who owns the applications, who looks after them, what areas actually use the applications, who supports them, who owns the data. Sometimes the data owner is different from the actual application owner. Get those key stakeholders that you think are going to have an interest in your project, and you might have to ask around a bit as well to get that, but get that all documented as well. Step number 4 is identify the project processes and governance of the organization. So how are you going to govern your project? Is there standard governance you have to follow? Can you just create your own governance? And what are the standard procedures that the projects are going to need to follow? So how do you get stuff into the production environment? What's the route to live through the test environments? Just identify what those key areas are and what the processes are, so you can start to get up to speed and learning about them and getting your system, your project logged on those logs if there are logs to be added to. And then step number 5, get some kind of plan together, definitely for the next few weeks. How are you going to get your project mobilized and off the ground and formalized, and how are you going to get the funding approved and all that? How are you going to get your team together? Your own personal plan for the next few weeks. And then ideally as well, just as soon as you can, what's that high level end-to-end plan? So you can start in your mind thinking about how the project is going to look, what the timelines, is it a year long? When's your go live date? When can you go live? And then just break it down into ideally just the mobilization phase, design phase, test phase, build phase, deploy phase. Okay, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button. And until tomorrow, please take care.